Sophia Carter sat across from her husband at the dining table, the dim glow of the chandelier casting soft shadows on the walls. The room was quiet, save for the rhythmic clinking of Ethan's fork against his plate. He was focused on his laptop, his fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard, barely acknowledging her presence. She set her wine glass down a little too hard. The sound made Ethan glance up, his blue eyes distant, as if she had interrupted something important. "You're working late again," she said, her voice calm but edged with something unspoken. "There's a deadline." His answer was clipped, dismissive. He didn't even look at her as he typed. Sophia swallowed the retort forming on her tongue. She had said this before. He had answered the same way before. Their conversations had become scripted, their lives a carefully maintained routine of avoidance and obligation. Once, she would have reached across the table, playfully stolen a bite from his plate, or teased him about always bringing work home. Now she only watched him, an ache blooming in her chest. She remembered when they used to talk, truly talk. Late-night conversations under warm blankets, whispered secrets, laughter that made her cheeks hurt. Those moments had dissolved into silence, replaced by Ethan's ever-growing devotion to his career and her increasing loneliness. Their 10-year-old daughter Olivia was already asleep upstairs, her presence the only thing tethering their marriage to a semblance of normalcy. Ethan finally shut his laptop, rubbing his temples. "I'm exhausted. We'll talk tomorrow, okay?" Sophia smiled tightly. Of course. Tomorrow never came. Later that night, after Ethan had turned in, Sophia lingered downstairs. She curled up on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through her phone, letting the quiet press in on her. Her fingers hesitated over a name she hadn't seen in years. Daniel Hayes. She wasn't sure why she clicked on his profile. Maybe curiosity, maybe something else. His face had barely changed, a little more defined. His dark hair still tousled in that effortless way she used to love. She remembered their college days, the way he used to make her laugh, how he had once confessed his feelings for her. She had chosen Ethan instead. A message bubble appeared before she could overthink it. "Daniel, Sophia Carter. It's been forever." Her pulse quickened. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. A part of her knew she should ignore it, but another part, one she hadn't listened to in years, urged her forward. "Sophia, it really has. How have you been?" The response was immediate. "Daniel, better now." She exhaled, half a laugh, half a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The words felt easy, familiar. Too familiar. A voice in the back of her mind whispered that this was dangerous. That nothing good could come from reopening doors that should stay closed. But as she glanced at the staircase, knowing Ethan was fast asleep, she typed back anyway. The first crack in the foundation had appeared. Chapter 2. The Pull of the Past. Sophia told herself it was harmless. Few messages, a nostalgic conversation between old friends. But as the days passed, her phone became an extension of her hand, her pulse quickening each time Daniel's name appeared on the screen. Their exchanges were effortless, each message drawing her further into a world that felt strangely untouched by time. "Daniel, remember the coffee shop near campus? You used to drown your lattes in cinnamon." "Sophia, some habits never die." "Daniel, I'll have to test that theory." The words lingered. She read them twice. Then again. Test. An invitation. That evening, she stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. She smoothed her hair, reapplied her lipstick, and studied the woman staring back at her. Was she really considering this? It was just coffee. Just a friend. But something deep inside whispered that wasn't true. The cafe was quieter than she remembered, the scent of espresso thick in the air. Daniel was already there, leaning back in his chair, his gaze finding hers the moment she walked in. "You came," he said, standing as she approached. "Of course." She smiled, sliding into the seat across from him. Up close, the years had done little to dull his charm. His presence was as magnetic as ever, Easy confidence, sharp humor, the way his eyes studied her like she was still the girl he used to know. Conversation flowed effortlessly. They talked about work, travel, old memories laced with laughter. But beneath it all, an unspoken tension hummed. At one point, Daniel leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "I never understood why you chose him." Sophia's breath caught. "Ethan?" she asked, though she already knew. Daniel nodded. "You and I. We had something real." His voice softened. "Didn't we?" A familiar ache spread through her. It would be easy to dismiss it, to say time had changed things, that she was happy. But was she? Sophia glanced down at her wedding ring, twisting it absent-mindedly. "I loved him." The words felt rehearsed. "I still do." Daniel studied her. "Does he know you're here?" She hesitated too long. A slow, knowing smile spread across his lips. "You deserve more, Sophia," he said, voice low. "You always did." Her heart pounded as she reached for her coffee, gripping the cup a little too tightly. She should leave. She should walk away before this turned into something it wasn't supposed to be. But when Daniel's fingers brushed hers, just for a second, she didn't pull away. Sophia told herself it wouldn't happen again. The coffee had been a mistake, an indulgence in nostalgia that should have ended the moment she stepped outside the cafe. And yet, as she sat in the dim glow of the bedside lamp that night, her fingers hovered over her phone, heart hammering with the weight of anticipation. "Daniel, tonight was nice. I've missed this." A warmth spread through her chest, followed swiftly by guilt. She glanced at Ethan, fast asleep beside her, his breathing slow and even. He had barely noticed when she came home, barely asked about her day. Her thumb hesitated over the keyboard. A reply would mean something. It would acknowledge the spark she had felt in the cafe, the one she had no business feeling. She typed anyway. "Sophia, me too." The moment she sent it, a hollow ache settled in her stomach. But when her phone vibrated again, her pulse betrayed her. "Daniel, let's do it again." She should say no. She should delete the messages, silence the thoughts creeping into the corners of her mind. Instead, she whispered into the darkness, "Good night, Ethan," and set her phone on the nightstand, screen glowing with a name she shouldn't want to see. Days turned into weeks. Messages turned into calls. Sophia found herself smiling more, laughing at things she hadn't in years. She felt seen again, like a version of herself she thought had been lost. The guilt was there, coiling beneath the surface, but she justified it in small ways. Just talking, just catching up. Until the night it wasn't. A cold drizzle misted the city as Sophia stepped out of her car, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. She had told Ethan she was meeting a friend for dinner. Technically, it wasn't a lie. The bar was quiet, tucked into a side street where no one she knew would see her. Daniel was already there. 2 glasses of wine waiting on the table. "You always liked red," he said, pushing one toward her. She took it, fingers brushing his. "You remember." "I remember a lot of things." His voice was soft, eyes searching hers. They talked, but this time words felt heavier. Every glance lingered a second too long. Every brush of skin was deliberate. The air between them was thick with something unspoken, something neither of them had the courage to name. Then Daniel reached for her hand. "Sophia," he murmured, thumb tracing slow circles over her palm. "Tell me to stop." Her breath caught. The world felt smaller, quieter, like the universe had folded in on this moment. She should pull away. She should think about Ethan, about Olivia, about everything she stood to lose. Instead, she whispered, "I can't." And just like that, the last boundary crumbled.